Triple Frontier is the latest film to come out on Netflix, and was written and directed by J.C. Chandor. At first, it was picked up by director Kathryn Bigelow after she won an Oscar for Best Director for The Hurt Locker, but for whatever reason, years passed and she went on and passed this project to someone else, instead opting to direct Zero Dark 30 and Detroit. Because of that, this film languished in development for quite a number of years, changing the cast members around, the directors, everyone involved in the project, ultimately until it came in the hands of Netflix, and it was passed on to director J.C. Chandor, who I've liked some of his work in the past. I really enjoyed All Is Lost with Robert Redford, and I wasn't quite as big of a fan of A Most Violent Year as other people were, but it's a good film. And eventually everything fell into place with this production, and now we have Triple Frontier in its current state today on Netflix. And I gotta say, I enjoyed it. It's a good film. It has a lot of good things going for it, and I hope that me sharing my thoughts with you today will convince you enough to test it out for yourself on Netflix. The plot of this film is relatively straightforward. You have a team of 5 men who previously worked together on black ops missions for the military. Fast forward to today's time, in which you see one of these men, portrayed by Oscar Isaac, has it out for a crime lord that's working in South America, and so he tries to recruit the other 4 members of his previous team to not only work together to eliminate this guy, but also to steal from his fortune that has ultimately built up his crime syndicate in South America. And the story goes from there, in which not only do we follow them as they carry out this mission, but the consequences that take place afterwards as well. If that does seem familiar in terms of what the story is and where it's going, I wouldn't necessarily blame you for that, because it does take place in familiar territory in terms of setting up the characters, what their overall mission is, and the logistics of how the story ultimately plays out. But I think that this is a quite ambitious and effective narrative, even though it does have flaws. It works to something in the second act that is surprising, but also is more morally ambiguous and complex than you might expect from the outset. Sure, the first half does focus on this crew, trying to set up their mission, get to where they're going, and ultimately carrying out what you expect them to do throughout most of the movie. But then eventually there's a shift, not only in the tone of the movie, but also just in what the characters are dealing with. And I think that makes for more interesting drama. And also it makes the action more complicated as you begin to think more about the morality of what you're seeing and what the characters are doing. For some, that might not necessarily work, because they may just go into this movie expecting a straight action film with effective action scenes and gunfights, and you do get that. But this film is more rewarding as a character piece in some ways, because with that shift that eventually does take place, for myself, I appreciate films that look at violence in such a way that makes you question the purpose of it all and the effect of it. And this film definitely deals with that. That's not the first time that Mark Boal has done this. Those are themes that are explored in other screenplays that he's written for Kathryn Bigelow films. So I'm glad that he definitely carried those themes over to this film. They're not necessarily original ideas, I want to say, but they work. And I think they add a lot of depth to characters portrayed by the 5 key actors in the film that wasn't already there. I'd have to say that's probably the weakest link of the film, is that the 5 characters portrayed by Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac, Garrett Hedlund, Charlie Hunnam, and Pedro Pascal, they work and they're functional in this story, but none of them have a lot of depth, save for Ben Affleck and Oscar Isaac, and that's probably intentional because the biggest stars in this film. But I would have preferred a film that gives them each something more to chew on, and not necessarily having 3 of the characters basically be voices of reason and voices of opposition towards the main 2 characters. They mostly serve as plot devices in that way, and I kind of wish there was a more unique approach to them rather than service the main characters. But this whole entire cast plays off together really well. Any film that has all of the 5 actors I mentioned and an ensemble working together almost all the time, I highly doubt that any film that has those actors would be unwatchable, and that's certainly not the case for this film. It's very entertaining, it's compelling, and it's definitely very watchable, especially for the fact that it looks gorgeous. It has a unique aspect ratio that's stuck somewhere in between the aspect ratio of this video, 178, and then also 235 or 2.4, which is typically what most films you might see in the big screen are like. It's kind of found somewhere in the middle of that, and it also shot extremely well. Although there are a couple of shots you can notice in the film where you can see there's blue screen in the background that kind of makes some of the depth of that cinematography not look as authentic as it could. Otherwise, everything here is just, you can see where the money went in this production. The locations, the action sequences, and how well they're filmed. Everything feels very competent, and I think that if this was shown generally in regular theater screens rather than just sticking mainly to Netflix, it could have done pretty well, since it does work pretty well on a cinematic scale. This movie has a lot of good things going for it. Its story, while flawed, You know, it has a lot of great ideas, and I think some of them do work. You know, the cinematography is excellent, the cast works really well, and I think Oscar Isaac probably delivers the best performance out of all of them. For those who are looking for some good action, there is some of that in here too, although I think the last action scene in the movie is kind of contradictory to what the movie is about. These characters are saying things that question the morality of what they're doing, and they're trying to figure out a better situation for them to get out of the terrible things that are happening to them. But ultimately what they go with and how it's presented in the filmmaking, it doesn't necessarily feel consistent with that tone that they're setting up. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's an effective movie. It's definitely worth the 2-hour watch on Netflix, and I'm excited to see what else J.C. Chandor does. I like his filmography so far, and I think this is definitely a worthy addition to what he's done before. And so with that, I'm going to give Triple Frontier a B. And as far as age recommendation goes, while there is violence in here, yes, I would say it's not more bloody or intense than most video games that kids or teenagers play nowadays. The main reason why this film got an R rating is because of its language. There's a lot of F words, there's a lot of S words as well. And so if you don't like language, I would suggest either watching it through VidAngel or just not watching it altogether. I would say it's probably best for people who are 16 years or older. Thanks again for watching this review. Look forward to more content coming later this week. And as always, I appreciate your support from me. Check out my Facebook or Letterboxd pages in the description below, and you guys have a good one. Thank you.